What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to That Nintendo Show. A quick update video for you guys today, touching up on some topics that we talked about the other day, including Switch 2 leaks, as well as new developments and rumblings within the Nintendo versus Pocket Pair lawsuit that I wanted to touch on. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button below. Subscribe if this is your first time on the channel, and I'm sure we'll be following these topics much more as they develop. I want to start with the Switch 2 hardware specs. So this is from a post by the user Kami on X. Now, this isn't this person leaking this stuff. They've just done a pretty good job just compiling all this into one video for us. And some of this stuff we've already talked about before, but we're going to touch up on it again just to make sure all of our information is more up to date. Let's put it that way. So pretty much the gist of their post here is talking about where the Switch 2 specs line up with more modern hardware. So of course, like everything Switch 2 related, it's all hearsay and rumors and alleged leaks until Nintendo finally comes out and says this information, okay? Handheld specs, right above the PS4 before DLSS, and the docked version or docked specs between PS4 Pro and Series S before DLSS, with more modern hardware than the former. Of course, this is just the raw numbers of what they're expecting the Switch to have. Now, when you start incorporating the DLSS into all this, you can, as they say, let the system punch above its own weight as far as what it's capable of doing. But just raw numbers wise, it's going to be pretty comparable to, I'm going to say last gen systems, because while the Series S is technically a more modern system, it does lack some things in the performance department to make it more affordable, and I don't think that's a bad thing. But like I said, once you start putting DLSS in there, you never know what you're going to get. You could really just show what they're capable of doing as far as advanced upscaling and AI and all that fun stuff that we love to talk about all the time. The RAM is slower than the PS5 and Series X and S in the speed department, but more capacity than the Series S. Should have 10.5 to 11 gigabytes of RAM available to games, going by the Switch 1's RAM allotment for its OS. So assuming that the system's going to have a total of 12 gigs of RAM inside of it. What I love about this is kind of seeing how much RAM's allocated for the OS. And the reason why that's so interesting to me is because, from my understanding, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is that the Switch 1 only had a very minimal amount of RAM allocated to the OS, which is the reason why it was lacking features that you would expect from an OS. So like the dynamic themes that people craved and wanted the entire generation of the system, which we never got, and a built-in voice chat. It requires more RAM to be allocated for the OS, which is why they couldn't do it. So two ways of thinking here. One, if they're allocating the same amount of RAM for the Switch 2 OS, those features might not show up again. And that would be very disappointing. At least the themes. Like, I've accepted now that voice chat, I don't think it's ever going to happen, at least not right now. But the themes, though, like we've had several generations, especially of handheld systems like the 3DS, with just amazing themes on them. And we get to the Switch, it's like, would you like black or white? And it's like, I don't know. I really want, like, I don't know, Zelda themes. Give me that. So hopefully we'll get something like that. Who knows? But more power under the hood's a good thing. And I don't know, maybe we will eventually get voice chat, or at least just kind of do like what the PlayStation and Xbox do now, where they have built-in Discord integration into voice chat. That would be cool. Because I don't know anyone personally that actually uses the Nintendo Switch Online voice chat app to do anything. Storage, we've already talked ad nauseum about the storage on the Switch 2 using this new UFS 3.1 transfer speeds, which will allow it to have more like SSD load times. And Samsung's got new SD cards coming out later this year that also take advantage of this. It says UFS 3.1 max speed should be a hair under the Series X/S, which would be 2.1 gigabytes a second versus 2.4 gigabytes a second. Still plenty fast, even if it's not maxed out. Lines up with what Digital Foundry and Nate Drake heard about decompression techniques and fast load times on the Breath of the Wild tech demo, which that happened, I believe, last year, where Nintendo showed a tech demo behind closed doors of Breath of the Wild running on the Switch 2, which is 0 load times, better graphics, and better performance. So that all checks out. So pretty much a lot of this information is kind of just honing in on a previous video that I made about just compiling all the Switch 2 information into one video. So kind of just a follow up there, making sure everything we have is kind of more up to date and honed in on that front. In this regard, though, this is a more powerful system, and more power typically means there's going to be a higher launch price. I'll bring this back around to the Switch in a second, but we're just off the heels of Sony announcing the PS5 Pro, and the PS5 Pro is starting at $700. Not to mention the optional accessories that you could get, including a disk drive and a vertical stand that could punch this thing up to $800 if you got everything. Now, what does that mean for consoles in general? My thought on it is that whatever the ceiling is of the previous generation kind of gives you an insight on what the floor is going to be for the next one. And if the PS5 Pro is creeping at $700 to $800, whenever the time comes that the PS6 comes out, you have a general idea of what that system is going to cost. And that's an eye-watering amount of money for a game console. I know people will pay it. Myself, probably, I don't know. But I'm using that as an example because Nintendo's in a similar boat. Thankfully, not by that much money. But the Switch 1, currently, still, after all this time, still $300. You can occasionally find it on sale for cheaper, but that's what its MSRP value is $300. And the Switch OLED is $350. So by that same logic, if the ceiling of the Switch 1 is $350, then that's kind of where the floor's at. But it's a new system, so more than likely it's going to start at $400. That's where my head goes with it. So I put a poll out the other day asking our community here, what is the most you'd be willing to pay for the Nintendo Switch 2? Majority of people, $400. Now, we have a couple different answers here. We're $450 and $500 and $550 plus also in the mix. And a lot of people also said $500. And I think that that's a reasonable amount, depending on what actually is inside the system and what it's capable of doing. And that's probably where I sit too. I can't see Nintendo going higher than $500 because they like to sell their systems for profit instead of at a loss like PlayStation and Xbox do. And that's kind of why they put the more inferior previous generation specs in there. And it all makes sense. The way I see this playing out is that the system's going to launch at $400, maybe $450 at the most. And then a year or two later, we'll get the OLED version because as far as we know, the current model that's going to release is going to have an LCD screen on it. And Nintendo, being the masterminds that they probably are going to release an OLED version later on because they know people will double dip. They know me. They know I'm going to double dip. It's going to happen. And so they've got this kind of figured out, and I can see that system launching at $500. Or if the regular one launches at $400, this one launches at $450. Thankfully, if the trends continue, we have another generation or two before Nintendo starts charging $700 for their game consoles. Hopefully it never gets to that, and that the PS5 Pro is just an outlier. But gosh, it's insane, and hopefully that trend does not continue. Anyway, I thought it was interesting to bring this up, and hopefully we're going to enjoy a less costly system going into next generation. All right, finally, let's talk about Nintendo versus Pocket Pair, aka Palworld. The other day when I put my video out, I kind of just jumped the gun, right? And just said whatever was on my mind about what's going on with Palworld, Nintendo finally suing them, Didn't really give it much thought. Not gonna lie, there wasn't a lot of research involved. I was just ready because I was someone, and I hope I'm not offending anyone who plays Palworld, but the minute I saw that game, I was like, this literally is a rip off of Pokemon, and I don't want people to get sued, and I don't want these people to lose money and everything. But I was definitely in camp, come on, Nintendo's not gonna let them get away with this, right? So when the video came out, I was all about like, oh, they're finally going after them. Posted pictures of the blatantly ripped off Pokemon designs. Well, apparently this lawsuit isn't about the designs of the monsters in Palworld, but more on the line of a patent infringement. Now, currently, we don't know what that patent infringement is. The online speculation is that it is about the mechanics of catching the monsters in the game, but nothing's confirmed. I'm actually going to reference this post on the Nintendo subreddit by the user Razor Beams because I think that they did a pretty good job kind of compiling everything together. It says, with Nintendo announcing that they're suing Pocket Pair, a lot of baseless speculation and inaccurate information has popped up. Here are a few things to clarify what is going on. This is a patent case, not a copyright case. Nintendo is suing Pocket Pair over patents, not intellectual property. They're not suing over whether or not Pocket Pair copied designs of 3D models, nor are they suing over Pocket Pair's alleged use of AI. This is a lawsuit over infringement of patented game mechanics. A similar game lawsuit that you might be aware of, Sega once sued the developers of The Simpsons Road Rage for patent infringement over the arrow that points to the right direction to go as seen in Crazy Taxi. This lawsuit was settled privately. And this lawsuit is happening in Japan since Nintendo and Pocket Pair are both Japanese companies. Nintendo is suing Pocket Pair in Japanese courts. US patent laws do not apply to this case. And then, of course, they talk about we don't know which patents that they're suing over, but I think that helps put a little more clarification into it because, like I said, I jumped the gun and immediately thought that they were going after the copyright infringement on the designs. But anyway, this I'm sure will be a continuously developing story along with Switch 2 because that seems to be all the rage right now. People are already speculating a new date that they're going to drop a trailer. I'm not going to get into all that because they're just going to announce it whenever they announce it. But as new things start to make their way up to the surface, I'll make sure I talk about them. Make sure you stay tuned to That Nintendo Show. We got Zelda Echoes of Wisdom coming out this week, so you'll be on the lookout for new videos regarding that. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you next time.